The road to American Civil War did not begin with cannons firing at dawn, but with a series of decisions rooted in fear, power, and identity, as we've covered the last several weeks. At the center of it all was secession, the physical act of saying, I am leaving this country. Bye, gone, new country. It was the act of 11 states choosing to leave the United States, and it seemed at first like a political protest, and Lincoln was saying, no, I'm not going to acknowledge you as your own country, as the President of the Union. But it actually turned into the deadliest conflict in American history. As we know from last week, in November of 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. His victory came without winning a single state in the South, which immediately alarmed many in the South. To them, Lincoln represented a growing northern power that threatened their way of life, particularly the institution of enslaving people, something they believed was a right, which was deeply tied to their economy and social structure. Although Lincoln had promised not to interfere with slavery where it had already existed, his opposition to expanding slavery into new territories turned many Southerners away from him. And that was really key. When Lincoln was campaigning in 1860, he was not saying, rah, 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 abolish slavery everywhere it is. That's not what was happening. What was happening was he was saying, no, here, I'm just not going to expand it. It's fine where it already existed. And then, the rest is history. Just weeks after the election, South Carolina took a bold and unprecedented step. In December of 1860, it formally seceded from the Union. Its declaration, the state argued that the federal government had violated its rights and failed to protect its interests, especially regarding slavery. South Carolina's leaders believed that just as the colonies had broken away from Britain, states had the right to break away from the Union if it no longer served them. Just like the 13 colonies broke away from the UK, now South Carolina can break away from the Union. To the South, that wasn't that different. Other southern states quickly followed. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas all seceded within the next several months. Together, they formed a new nation, the Confederate States of America. They established their own government, elected Jefferson Davis as president, and began organizing an army. To them, secession was not a rebellion. It was independence. Do you consider the Revolutionary War a rebellion against Britain? To the South, those two are one and the same, seceding from the Union and seceding from Britain. Meanwhile, in the North, the reactions were mixed, but increasingly firm. Many Northerners saw secession as illegal and dangerous. The United States was not just a loose alliance of states, they argued, but a permanent union, to build a more perfect union. If states could simply leave whenever they disagreed with an election, the entire system of democracy could collapse. Lincoln himself made this clear in his inaugural address in March of 1861, which is a speech you should definitely read. I mean, both of his inaugural addresses are absolutely textbook. Still, Lincoln hoped to avoid war. He made it clear that he would not initiate conflict, but he also refused to recognize the Confederacy as a legitimate nation. So the idea of civil war, it's on you, South, I'm not going to start. This created a tense standoff, especially over the federal property located in the South. One of the most important of these was Fort Sumter, a Union-held fort in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. By April of 1861, the situation reached a breaking point. Confederate forces demanded that Union troops abandon Fort Sumter. When the Union refused, Confederate cannons opened fire on April 12th. After 34 hours of bombardment, the Union forces surrendered. Though no one was killed in the battle itself, its significance was enormous. It marked the beginning of the Civil War. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to put down what he described as a rebellion. This move pushed 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, to secede and join the Confederacy. Those are 4, Tennessee, Virginia, more or less border states. Lincoln was fighting for dear life to keep those states loyal to the Union. What had started as a political crisis was now a full-scale war. The United States against former United States. At the core, secession transformed disagreement into conflict. Before secession, tensions over slavery, states' rights, and economic differences had existed for decades. Events like the Missouri Compromise of 1850, and Kansas-Nebraska Act had attempted to balance these tensions, often only delaying the inevitable. But here we are, we can't delay it anymore. But secession shattered any remaining possibility of compromise. Once states left the Union, the question was no longer how to live together, it was whether the Union itself would survive. For the Confederacy, the war became a fight for independence and the preservation of their society. For the Union, it was a battle to maintain national unity. Over time, it would also become a fight to end slavery, especially after Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared enslaved people in Confederate-held territory to be free. But of course, the Confederacy said, no, whatever laws you pass over in the Union, they don't affect us because we're different countries. But Lincoln was like, yeah, they do, because you're not your own country. Looking back, it is clear that secession was a definitive turning point. Without it, the United States might have continued to struggle through political disputes and compromises, but secession forced a choice: either accept the breakup of the nation or fight to preserve it. Neither side was willing to back down. In the end, the Civil War lasted 4 long and brutal years, costing more than 600,000 lives. The Union was preserved and slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment. But the scars of secession and the war would linger for generations.